on to episode 2 of Jacked. We have just finished the first 3 days of week number 1 here in the SSBL Season 8. As you guys are watching this, lots of games are going on for Super Saturdays, which we will also get into later in Overrated, Underrated. I'm Jay Watt alongside FiSack here for episode 2. We had a crazy first 3 days. Everyone's now got a game underneath their belt. Some upsets, some crazy games, high-scoring games. Day 1 was insane. FiSack, quick thoughts on how the first 3 days went.
It feels like there's not one narrative this season, which is different because I feel like each season, at least that I've been a part of, it feels like there's been an overall narrative of the first week of games, the first couple of weeks, but it's hard to pinpoint right now really what is happening in the league. I think the biggest thing overall is still like the strikeouts to walks ratio is pretty much constant throughout all the games. But besides that, like, it's really hard to find what is the solid ground right now.
Right.
And I think we're still going to need a couple of weeks to figure out what normal is for the league in season 8.
Yeah, it'll be crazy to see how, when we're here in week 4 is concluded and we see how kind of things roll then. So we'll get right into the recap. Start off with the first game of the entire season. This one, was predicted to be that blowout win, but it took a little bit for the Serpents to really get rolling. Angels get out to an early, I think 2-0 lead, and Courageous Moth put on an absolute clinic, which was unexpected really from the Angels. FiSack, thoughts on this 13-2 win by the Serpents?
I think this is going to be a recurring theme whenever we talk about the Angels this season, which is the bullpen. This was a game where I think the Serpents still would have edged it out eventually as well, but we are really seeing right now that bullpen is going to be the reason why the Angels are potentially 0-14 this season. Like, I'm already calling it right now, that unless changes happen into the overall structure of the starting rotation and the bullpen, that's going to be the case. I mean, particularly with having Pinto as a closing pitcher, there is no help in relief whatsoever for the Angels, and it's going to be to their detriment. I mean, just looking at the order that they have, their relief pitching is 121, 112, 75. Yeah. And then you have Pinto at 134. There's no help in the bullpen whatsoever. And so for the Angels, if they get a win somehow this season, I think it's going to have to be through, potentially the number 2 in the rotation, like having a Jen Fury go pretty much all the way and then Pinto closing. But the Serpents, they had an off season last year, and then they come into this season business as usual from spring training, and they're well on pace to do what they need to do this season.
Yeah, Leon Morrison absolutely carried that team really in that game, putting on a clinic at the plate. You know what, with this Angels team, and which, by the way, I always forget as well, it's going to be 0-16, not 0-14, since we are moving to the 2 additional games.
Maybe I'm saying it's starting 0-14 and then holding up. No, it completely forgot. Yeah, we're in a 16-game season.
So Angels do have a rough road ahead of them, especially they take on the Wildcats this weekend, or as this is now airing live on YouTube, they're Wildcats on Super Saturday. So we'll see. Which will transition right into our next game number 2. Wildcats, they put up 19 runs against the Stingers, which pot of gold came out. We're expecting kind of, a very close contest. 19 to what was the final score?
19-4 was the final score,
and 10 of those 19 runs were unearned. So the woes, the errors, right, are really, it bit them right in the ass.
These are 2 teams that last season kind of had a bit of bad luck. The Wildcats definitely more so than the Stingers. I think that the Stingers last season, even though they ended up making postseason, I think they kind of underachieved from their potential. And so, it was something's got to move. The immovable object versus the stoppable force here. and it resulted in, I think, fate determining that the Wildcats were the ones who were the most egregious earners of bad luck last season. Because man, wow, I'm already calling it right now. It was a bad take last week when I said that it was overrated, the move from Tiger Den, because man, they have been able to open up, and the Wildcats finally feel like they're back on track. Last season was just a blip on the radar, and then for the Stingers, as this is coming out, playing against the Cyclones, we said that they were needing to panic, just as every single team in that Nova's division should be panicking. And I think after the first round of games, the ball player is the only one with a win. I definitely think that that's still the case. I think that they've got it tough, and again, they don't get a break because they have to start against the Unicorns. Granted, that game against the Unicorns is going to be the Unicorns number 4 against their number 3, but the Unicorns have the best pitching staff in the entire SSBL as well. So bad luck for the Stingers, and definitely one you just want to forget about.
Right, and Jackson Moore, the fourth, coming out and absolutely, getting revenge for being traded from the Stingers to that Wildcat squad, having the first home run of the entire SSBL season, which was an absolute shot to center field. So the Wildcats in this Angels contest, I'm very curious how this game is actually going to end up. Wildcats are probably one of the teams that we'll get to in overrated, underrated. One of those teams to kind of look out for. It's just one game. We've seen this before. Walkers beat the Moonshots like 15-1 or something last season, or 15. It was some crazy score. So we'll see
after getting blown out.
Yeah. So we'll see how things go as we progress with the Wildcats. Game number 3, Gauchos. Took them a while, a late surge towards the last couple of innings to really get past that Knights squad, which obviously the pitching is not there with the Knights. Very much older pitching. We had Miles Hurley on the mound to start, which didn't do terrible by any means at the start. It was a little, like I said, it was a late surge by that Gauchos lineup that it took them a while to wake up.
And to be honest, like the final scoreline was 11-4 Gauchos. So your first inclination is to say, well, the pitching needs to get better for the Knights, but the Knights out hit the Gauchos 13-11, as well as had really the telltale was that or rather the Gauchos only out hit the Knights 13-11. The telltale was, of course, the walks. There were 12 walks given up by Knights pitching, only 2 given up by Gauchos pitching. But at the same level, you're not really getting out hit that badly. And with 11 hits, you really need to be getting more than just the number of runs that they had, which was 4. They need to be doing better in that regard. And so I think for the Knights, of course, this is an off season for them, but if you're the Gauchos, and I think Marge was like noting this, where there's still, any day, any night, any team can come forth and really shock, which is what we'll talk about in the end of day 2 in terms of shock factor.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And well, obviously, with the Gauchos, Samir Tailwind did not have the greatest of games. So even though they still have a 7-run victory at their belt, that's also with one of their best bats really struggling against that Knights lineup. So we'll see how they progress in their next game. Their next game being, what is it? They do not play Super Saturday as the Gauchos is what I'm referring to. So they play...
I believe week 3, day 1, they play the Express.
Yeah, Express. So they have, a nice little matchup ahead of them against that young Express squad. Moving on, this one was such a crazy game. Probably one of my favorite games of the entire week. There was a few other ones as well, but this one, Bombers High Rollers, man, back and forth throughout. Floston pitched well, CDC pitched well, and injury bug hit the Bombers really, really hard. And then that kind of helped that High Roller squad just reach to a whole nother level, forcing extras, and then finally Carlito Beltran hitting that walk-off home run to send the High Rollers home and sending the Bombers packing for the second time on opening day.
Yeah,
Bombers
and this was
have
a game
2 lost, by the way, on opening day and opening week. They're both to the High Rollers.
Yeah, I mean, this is we noted how in terms of the run up to this game, how we felt like it was the Bombers' game to win because of how much the High Rollers have kind of rolled over them, and that was still the case even here today. I mean, again, overall, it was a very, very close game. 12 hits apiece between each team, 3 walks apiece between each team, 1 home run apiece between each team. It really just was a game of margins. And this is definitely a matchup to watch out for as we continue throughout the season. Eventually, we'll go to the Emerald Diamond, and the High Rollers will have to come and face the rainbows that
Yep.
are going to be eking out from Emerald Diamond there when they go to play the Bombers. So we'll have to see if that continues. But you know, Bombers definitely a squad that need to get wins in which they can. Just got to move on from this one. And compared to all the losses this week, I think in terms of upsets, this was by far the one that was a little bit more expected that could definitely happen.
Right, absolutely. Which leads us to our next contest, heading into that Epic Novas division. Ball players and Cyclones. Cyclones had an incredible lead, and then they just disappeared. And then the ball players, the Thunders, they all just came rolling in against the Cyclones, and bringing them to a 7-6 victory over the Cyclones.
Yeah, this is the game that I had the ball players winning. I had it being 7-2, 7-3, something like that. And I said they were going to get most of the runs early, and they did end up winning. They did end up getting 7, but it wasn't until the end of the game, and it was that 8th inning comeback for them. I think without a doubt, the ball players have cemented themselves. Again, these are all takes with one game in, so take them with a grain of salt. But I think the ball players have shown here, especially getting a divisional win, that they are here to play, and that the ball players have always been a team that has always kind of auctioned the farm to play now. And I feel like we've always said that their time is coming and that they can't keep getting away with this, but they keep on getting away with it.
Yep.
So like, how much longer do we have to say that until they don't get away with it? So I mean, definitely for the ball players, I think definitely off of Pacifica Northwest, not the best start, but it was the
No, not at
bullpen
all.
with Haichu coming over from the Gauchos and Mario Wrestles coming over from the Bombers. They've really shored up that bullpen, which has traditionally been a weak point for them. And I think they've done well in terms of that regard. So definitely on the right foot in what's going to be a very tough Epic Novas
Yeah.
division.
No, absolutely. It's being in that conference myself. It's we're one game in for everybody, and it's just going to be an uphill battle for. I mean, ball players showed up. They showed up when it mattered, and that's what they got the win, and a crucial win at that. As that's an at home game against a pretty tough Cyclone squad. Which, moving on, Express, they make their debut, but they fall short to the Vikings in an 8-2 loss. Vikings, who we kind of were on the fence with coming into the season. I got you if if you start falling over.
Yeah, yeah. No, sorry. I barely forgot how to breathe.
Express, they come out and they fall 8-2. What are your thoughts on this Express lineup, and kind of also your thoughts on the Vikings? As we, like I mentioned, we thought they were kind of gonna be on the lower end of this heroic side.
Yeah, I think this doesn't really tell the tale for either team. I think this season, it does tell a tale in terms of we noted, like heading into this season, that the issues with the Vikings are not necessarily with that starting rotation. It's not at all with that starting rotation.
Mhm.
Holiday Minshew, Hot Mike, Chestnut, not a single one of those are below 234 in terms of overall pitching. And your main three is 289, 269, 268 overall pitching. The issue is not with the starting pitching. The issue is in that when you eventually have to go to your bullpen, are you going to get Tammy John, who's 270 overrated, to come in as your relief pitcher, or are you going to have to rely on anywhere of the committee of Barnstormer, Butts, and Walker, all who are 158, 167, 140. And so at face value, you have that. And then also the hitting and fielding of this Viking squad is not what it used to be as well. They didn't have a ton of changes to their overall main lineup. in terms of from one season to the other. And so it's not a bad lineup, but it certainly hasn't necessarily gotten better. So I think this is a case in which the Vikings' success this season is going to depend on their starting pitching. How many innings can Holiday, Minshew, Hot Mike chew up? In this case, the Holiday nearly went 7, and then in came Tammy John, which I think is like the ideal setup. If they can find a way to get the AI to do the starter and then Tammy John, they honestly will be really good. I think they could definitely compete in the Legends. However, I don't think that's going to be the case long term. As to the Express, they're an expansion side. And so as a result, they don't have the depth that is necessary to really compete week in, week out. I do think that they have like a lineup of real veterans that can like help steer the ship a little bit. It's weird calling DDC and Gwen Atwood veterans, but compared to the rest of this roster, they genuinely are veterans. Telly Mackin as well, so a lot of former Dragons actually in that main lineup, and I'm pretty sure Vanessa Marzo is also on the bench for them as well. So they've got some veteran bats and some veteran minds in the field to sort of help steer them, but that pitching is definitely going to be an issue for them as we continue the season.
Right, and also to note, Amir Williams for the Vikings out for 2 weeks with an injury. So Amir Williams out of that lineup as well. So that's 2 games for the Vikings that he will be missing. So that's a tough loss for a Viking squad who will need to put up some runs. So moving on, Unicorns, they handle the Mythic quite well, obviously, with their pitching staff. It was a 6-1 victory, so not any blowouts like we saw on day one, but Unicorns doing what the Unicorns do and coming out with that victory.
Yeah, I think I'm still a little bit cautious if I'm the Unicorns, though. Again, like, no one questions that they have the best roster in the SSBL, but it did take until the 5th inning for the things to start turning. Unfortunately, Delfino just a little bit too long of a start there. And, the rest of the Mythic pitching only gave up 2 earned runs for the last half of the game as well. So it really just was a case of Delfino didn't get pulled when he should have, or when they should have rather. And then for the Unicorns, they only out hit the Mythic 8-7. So it definitely was a case of the Mythic just not being able to convert their runs. I still think the Unicorns are the team to beat. I still think the Mythic, they're supposed to be a team that are taking the season as well. So not much to pull from this game overall, just kind of along the lines of expected, which cannot really be said for the last one on day 2.
No, absolutely. And, that brings us to what you had mentioned in terms of upsets. The Dogs got walked completely by the Walkers,
which is really funny because
of the tweet.
Puppet tweeted, "Get ready to get walked," and it's like, you mean get like walked over? Because if you're walking them, then they're gonna do well. And sure enough, they outwalked them 4-3 in terms of pitching. So it really wasn't the pitching; it was just the retrievers just couldn't convert. And then in the end, it was just too much too late. What was really surprising, I think, was that bottom of the 7th 4-run spurt by the Walkers that just came out of nowhere, and really like Hainer and Goo, the recipients in terms of the fault of that. We said last week that the Retrievers, they are not where they necessarily need to be. This is only one game. We'll see. I mean, we don't encourage drinking here in terms of excessive drinking, but there's got to be a drinking game somewhere between. This is a little bit early to say, but I feel like I'm saying it again here, where like the Retrievers, again, they are very much in a division where they have the opportunity to get at least a 4-0 record in their division with the Liberty and the Moonshots. And then I still say, like, I have yet to see this Retrievers team show to me that they are going to be better than the Overdraft. I think the Overdrafts have built a really, really good roster. And it's not that Retrievers aren't a good roster by any regard. It's just when you compare their rebuild to other teams that have also been doing their rebuild, the Gauchos have arrived. The Wrong Fielders, they've basically almost gotten there as well. The Unicorns, they've gotten there. And so they are unfortunately always going to be measured against how those teams do. And so for them, I feel like it's almost like the Stingers a little bit, where it's not that they're a bad team by any regard, but I think expectations are a little bit higher because of how long in the process they have been, which is no fault of their own. But it just adds a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Walkers though, Crew Hart, the veteran on that squad, absolutely carrying them. Which obviously we look at the Walkers from a pitching perspective. And we're like, okay, they're gonna go 0-14 to start, right? 0-14 lead to 0-16. But to be honest, man, if you have Crew Hart in your lineup, there's a good chance that you have a fight regardless from the offensive side, no matter who you're playing. So it's something to keep an eye out for the Walkers, especially as they head to face the Vikings. Crew Hart, he might show up and put on another show at Motor Yard. So
Which is something, to be blunt, Josh, because we were talking about this as league office is, the one that's running the Walkers, looking at the options for the Walkers moving forward. And one of them is potentially shipping off Crew Hart in terms of, yes, he's a veteran, but he does possess so much quality that surely there's a team somewhere that would potentially need him. So definitely, if you are in need of a veteran infielder though with some hitting, definitely reach out to Zarby, is the one who's controlling league office right now. Not that we're in the business of shilling out players for individual teams, but just because league office is the one that's running them and sort of the caretaker managers of it, it's worth noting of like, this is a Walker squad that shouldn't be winning right now.
Right, the squad should be winning, but Crew Hart, if he's on that roster, there's a chance. Literally, now that thinking about it after watching the Retrievers game, the Walkers have a chance at any game, like any of those games. You have Milo Dakota, who also put on a nice showing as well. He's a younger compared to Crew Hart. I want to say he's a season 4, but still, like Milo Dakota showed up, Crew Hart showed up. They still have somewhat of an offense to pull out the games. It's the pitching that really is their struggle. Which leads us to probably another massive upset here in the Epic Conference. Sparrows shutting out the Skulls, which hurt me so bad to watch. But to be honest, a 2-0 loss. If this was Panic and Chill, I'm still chill because it was Sir Alex Einstein. He did have some nice Ks here and there, but I'm still chill. But the Sparrows, though, they come out of the gates with a 2-0 win, which now makes, if I'm not mistaken, as a head manager, Styx, also known as Wigan, the only other manager outside myself to have wins with multiple squads as a head manager. So that's something I thought about the other day after that victory by the Sparrows.
Which reminds me, I need to update the SSBL history doc so that we can have those new managers that are in there. But yeah, I think the biggest overall take here, I think, is one, the starting pitching, at least from the Sparrows, has some backing for it, as well as the Skulls bats needs to wake up, without a doubt. Cannot put up a goose egg against the extension side. I'm going to go ahead and say right now that there should not be any team in the SSBL that is putting up a goose egg against any of the expansion sides.
No,
just in regards to the depth of pitching, it's a real issue if you are not able to convert. And for the Skulls part, like, they had 5 hits, but you got to be able to orchestrate it together as a single unit. I think maybe there's still some growing pains in terms of the new lineup, like synergy together, obviously. But the legacies need to start stepping up and measuring up to what Kip Shaw, what Carl Henry, what all of their parents before them did for a legendary Skulls franchise.
No, absolutely. Lots of runners left on base, so definitely got to execute. How many walks was in that game from the Skulls side in terms of offense?
There was only 1 walk given up by the Skulls pitching. There were 6 walks given up by the Sparrows pitching.
So essentially, if you think about it from that perspective, that is 11 left on base. 11 basically left on base, if you think of it that way. That's not good
at all. And you don't want to think of it that way because that just pains you.
No, that's not good at all. Moving on, though, Wrongfielders spoil the Liberty debut. We kind of expected this, though, from the Wrongfielders, as we did. They're definitely a squad that has all the pieces they need to finally pull out some wins. And obviously Liberty coming in as an expansion team, we don't really know what to expect from the Liberty, but Wrongfielders pulling out the victory 4-1 at the Liberty as well. So a home game for the Liberty, their home debut spoiled by the Wrongfielders.
Yeah, and I think, this is Leela Blurns, stepping up in terms of back when she was drafted. Just gonna look up real quickly here. I think she was a season 6 draft pick, or was she a season 7 draft pick?
Remember
She
season 6 or
was
7.
I think she was 6 because yes, she was the number 12 overall selection in the season 6 draft. Uh, and there were questions of when she was selected, when she was picked up, Cade 6 was still on the board. Adolan Colon still on the board. Parts Polo Cologne still on the board. Obi-Wan Mahomey, Lucy Freischad, Archibald Lonshanks, Pato Gold. These are names. Rimuru Naofumi, like these.
Yep.
Fitzmagic. I'm just sorry. I'm just going down. I'm seeing all these names. And Switty Merbergman Jensen, Austin Floston, Doku Shi, Zelda Narwhal.
All these big time players with these
Donna Pitchwell, Liam Bosch, Jake Carter. Like, these are all names that have established themselves already in the league. And there was a lot of scrutiny, I think, in terms of Blurns getting selected at number 12 when you still had, like, Mishka Boyd was selected in the 3rd round of the draft before Blurns. And so she had a lot to prove, especially now sort of taking over the ace role for this Wrongfielders squad. And she stepped up to the plate. And I think this is finally going to be the season where the pitching woes for the Wrongfielders will abate. I mean, you look at their squad; they've got 2 specialists. Funderburker still has K-Dud on him, but they do not have a single pitcher below season 4. And if you throw out Daryl Cage, which throwing out Daryl Cage, I think is hard to do in terms of, as a season 4, still a 191 overall rated pitcher. These are all season 6, season 7 pitchers. So finally, the Wrongfielders have the pitching core. And you know what? Lasers, his selection, I think maybe Blurns will finally pay off this year. Maybe this is the season that we finally learned that listen, the rabbit didn't win the race, right? It was the tortoise. And so maybe it was the development of Blurns that got them to this level.
Absolutely. Which they play you guys come Monday. So their next matchup is we're going to Colonial Plaza for you, or you guys are traveling to Colonial Plaza. So safe travels there.
It's going to be Princess Leia versus Lee as that matchup there.
That should be a good matchup as well. Moving on, Overdraft's bankroll on the Moonshots, winning 10-3. This offense is scary. You bring it over, and this is another one of those. It was a very big revenge week for a lot of players in the SSBL. Bojack playing out of his mind as well against his former squad. Bisac, thoughts on this Overdraft squad? Obviously, in a rebuild, Moonshots.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I want to talk about is just like who we forget what the Overdrafts did. The Overdrafts shipped off two number 1 picks, 7 and 19, as well as actually 3 number 1 pick or 3 round 1 picks with the 7, 19, 20, Floss, Knight, Jax midfield, all to get Bojakun, Nico Baca, D. Belford. Like, that's just at face value, along with the trade that they did to get Donnie Bonatello. So let's look at how those guys did in their debut. Bojakun, 2 for 3, 3 runs, RBI, 2 walks. We don't have extra base hits here, so that's part of it. Nico Baca was 0 for 4 with a walk and a strikeout, as well as, who was the last one there? D. Belford. I don't know if Belford pitched. No, Belford didn't pitch, but Bojakun is been a terror in this league. He is the scum of the SSBL. I'm just calling it right now. That dude he's almost like an Indominus Sue in terms of the way this league operates. He just oozes confidence and showed that here playing against his former squad against the Moonshots. Overdrafts they shipped off a lot to get those pieces. And that is why I have said, from Jacked episode 1, I think the Overdrafts are the team to beat in that division. I really do. I think that if you look at the rest of the Icons division, I think the only one that can give them trouble is the Retrievers, and I'm not confident the Retrievers can produce at the same level, especially when you look at the overall roster and organization. So the Overdrafts are definitely a very scary team. As we speak, I am going to be playing them. So at as well.
I also play them, so I'm not looking forward to that one.
Are they at El Viejo?
Yeah, LVO. Yep.
So I'll be traveling to El Viejo. I think it might be the first time the Dragons have played at El Viejo since losing to the wrong fielders at all the way back when in times that were before me, and I don't want to
Long
talk
time
about
ago.
it. So they are definitely a scary squad, and honestly, if I'm naming like the top threats in the heroic, I'm thinking Gauchos, I'm thinking Lumberjacks, I'm thinking Overdrafts.
No,
I
I
think the
agree.
Overdrafts was
I'm
now
with
my
you.
top 3 is scary.
No, I'm with you on that. Which you bring up the Lumberjacks, and you bring up yourself. We brings us to Lumberjacks, handling you guys quite well, in the first game of the season. Lumberjacks looking good, to be honest, looking real good. Obviously, this is a game that you're a little bit heartbroken on, as we'll get into Panic and Chill later. But thoughts on this game and how this Lumberjack squad, who is quite one of the older squads in terms of lots of still season fours on this team, but still getting some young young players as well.
Yeah, I ever since I joined in season 4, I have always sort of been of the opinion that what could I have done to have made this different, right? And I think about that in terms of roster building. I think about that specifically like with pitching as well. And going into this season, I genuinely don't know if there was any other deal I could have made for the roster that I have in order to like make them better. I know people have talked about like Pastry being in the minors, um, but Pastry being in the minors doesn't change giving up 9 runs. Especially when you've got a ridiculously locked in. And I just want to tell you, screw you. Absolutely screw you for shipping Denver Brainstorm to the Lumberjacks. I will never forgive you for that. Never forgive you for shipping Brainstorm over to the Lumberjacks. But honestly, like that's my opinion. In terms of like the way I try to like manage my squad is I'm never for fully competing in a season. And I'm also never for fully rebuilding in a season. And
Mm,
maybe that means I'm destined to be mediocre, but that's just the way that I like to go about things is to have
I respect
a
it.
future as well as be able to, at least show up. I mean, most of the Super Series winners have been wild cards. I say all that going into this game, there's not a single thing I could have done. There's not a single thing that I could have done. Like in terms of the pitching that I had go out, starting do something, starting having Cosmo come in, Jackson Tippy Cup. Like I didn't even have Bradley come in, who is the worst pitcher on my roster. There is not a thing I could have done. The
No.
Lumberjacks outclassed us in every aspect of the game, getting runners on base, converting runners into actual runs, pitching, getting out of jams. I think like the Dragons had a little bit of that early on where they were able to get out of jams, but it was just flirting with the devil because eventually Denver Brainstorm came calling, and I don't know what I did to him, but he does not like the Dragons whatsoever, and absolutely demolished our pitching. There's absolutely nothing the Dragons could do. Lumberjacks completely outclassed everyone in that game, and they're definitely still top 3 in the SSBL. You mentioned their age. Uh, Chris Luzon, Gene Dream, Flip Pecker, they sort of represent the younger guys on their squad, as well as pitching. They have Berenice and Santana. The rest are all, like you mentioned, season 4, season 5, season. They even had some season 2s here and there. And you look at the rest of their roster as well, and you have to think that this is probably maybe their last year of domination, in terms of unless they make trades in the offseason, sort of like what the overdrafts did. I think everyone thought the overdrafts were going to be done this season, that they were screwed, and that Running was just running away from a problem he didn't want to inherit. But it turns out Running left a franchise that the overdrafts have really done a really good job. And I think you have to applaud Blackman for the job that he has done in
Absolutely.
building that roster. I know I'm speaking a lot about this right now and like kind of going over time in terms of discussion of this, but I think it kind of like sums up overall like where we are in the heroic. I think this game really sums up where we are in the heroic in terms of like there are still some old guards that are holding true. The Lumberjacks have dominated pretty much every single year that they've been in, and they went 12-2 last season, and it wasn't a fluke.
Yep.
So
Yep. And they're back at
sorry,
it.
sorry for
No,
all
you're
of
fine.
that.
They're back at it again. They play their next game isn't until next week, week 2, day 3. They head to face the Liberty on the road. So we'll see what the Lumberjacks offense does against that young Liberty squad. Which brings us to our next segment: overrated, underrated. We have obviously, if you look on the right side of your screen, you have the topics for both of our segments. Retrievers are on there twice for a reason. So we'll start with the Wildcats, though. Obviously, they have their 19-4 victory. Obviously 10 of those 19 runs are unearned, thanks to Ace to Salsa from the Stingers botching a potential double inning. I want to say inning double play. Wildcats, overrated, underrated, or what are we thinking as they put up the most runs so far in this season?
I'm gonna go with underrated. I think that this game, in terms of like panic and chill and we'll talk about panic and chill for the league office teams, but I'll go ahead and forebode in terms of the Stingers. I think it's the same level of panic that you had before entering this game, to be honest. Like I know 19-4 is a large score. I do think it's enough of a large score that it's a little bit of an anomaly. So I think for the Stingers half, it's not necessarily overrated, underrated, but for the Wildcats, I actually think it's underrated. I think that this showed more about the Wildcats than this showed about the Stingers, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
being honest. And I think especially with the Wildcats, they're in a division in the new galaxy that they are a part of, where the Unicorns. That's the team they have to beat. Mythic Angels are going to do nothing. Mythic have already said outright that they're tanking. So it is the galaxies between the Unicorns and the Wildcats.
Mm-hmm.
And given that, I think you could go ahead and say that both of those teams should be going 4-0 against the Mythic and Angels
And we get
in
that
their
and we
division.
get that matchup on Monday. The Unicorns,
Yeah,
Wildcats,
the
headed to
episode
Bengada.
episode yeah, episode 1 of it, but off of that level, it's a 16-game season.
Yep.
2 of your games are against those two teams, the Unicorns and Wildcats. And I think because it is now a 16-game season, I don't know if those matchups matter as much in that division where both of those two leaders should be going 4-0 against the rest. I think really for the Wildcats, their key to success, if they want to upset the Unicorns in the Galaxy, is to get the wins out of their division, is to do well in their interdivision play, to do well in their inter-conference play. And winning against the Stingers does that. Doing it in week 1 does that. So I think that the Wildcats are underrated in terms of this is a huge, huge win for them for multiple reasons, but especially when you look at the overall like archetype of what the Galaxy might be this season.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you on this one. Underrated is that of the Wildcats. This is a squad coming into this season that we were kind of like, they're on like the edge of, are they going to do well? Obviously, this is just one game, small. This is just one game. You never know what can happen here in their next game. Obviously, it's the Angels, so we have a good expectation there. But again, I think this is a squad coming into this season that no one's talking about, and now I think they're an underrated squad that's going to look to prove everyone wrong, and really show up and maybe even take that Galaxy division. You never know.
It's too quick to say, but I do think again, I think this game proved more for the Wildcats than it did the Stingers.
Which brings us to the Retrievers, obviously getting upset by the Walkers. We talked about them last week. We'll talk about them again in Panic and Chill. Retrievers, is it too early to call them, overrated, or are they still kind of like an underrated situation here?
I'm going to go overrated, and I'm going to go overrated because I think the expectations are so high for them, especially from Puppet himself in terms of what he expects out of his team. Again, I don't think the Retrievers are a bad team. I think they're going to make postseason. I think they very much can compete with the overdrafts in the Icons. but I think when you weigh the expectations for the Retrievers, not only within the organization, but compared to, as I said before, the Gauchos, the Unicorns, you compare them to the other teams that started taking the same sort of timeline that they have. They're overrated in terms of where I think people thought that they would be, especially given like the Icons was a gift this season to the Retrievers, given that they have the Liberty and the Moonshots this season, who are both openly tanking. And Liberty a little bit less so, but the Moonshots like full on tanking. And the Overdrafts, who we thought were dead in the water, like before any offseason moves, before the Overdrafts traded all those season one picks, this was the Retrievers division, without a doubt. And the Retrievers were in the top three. They're no longer in my top three, and that's why they're overrated. Not because they're not good, but because of how heavy the expectations are.
Right.
Through fault of their own, but also through no fault of their own.
Right. Which leads us to the overdrafts. As you mentioned, they rebuild their entire squad, giving up all those first round picks. To be honest, I'm going to still say that they're. I don't think they're overrated at all. I think they're rated. I don't even think they're underrated. I think they're rated exactly how they should. This roster with a rebuild, they got a nice solid pitching staff. They're rated right where they need to be, and I think they'll continue to prove that as the season progresses.
I'm actually going to go with, for everyone else, I'm telling them that they are underrated. For myself, I'm saying that they're overrated. And I say that because I really think people dismiss the overdrafts heading into the season in terms of how much damage they could do. And I think it's because we had in our mind what the overdrafts were last season and how they just absolutely crashed at the end of the season. And going into this season, like that pitching core, K, Bonatello, Bammer, Chattington, and then in the bullpen, Belford, Hanson, Nuts, Boss. It's this amalgamation of the new and the old, of the rookies and the veterans. And so that's why I say I tell everyone else they're underrated. Like, you guys need to understand when I say they're going to win the Icons, I'm not trying to do just a hot take. That's genuinely what I think that they are capable of, especially with Bojakoon on the squad, as well as Nico Baca, if she can find it, because obviously bringing in as a fantastic defensive catcher, honestly, maybe even better of a defensive catcher than Bailey Smith, who is not even playing catcher anymore.
Right.
But that's not for me to say here or there. But I'm going to say overrated in terms of they got to win this season.
Right.
Because if they don't win this season, the only pitchers that they have that are season 6 or older are K, are Chattington, and our Boss. That is all they have. All the rest of their pitchers, including in the minors, are season 4 and older, including 2 season 1s, a season 2, and a season 3.
Yep.
So this is their season to do it. Now, granted, who knows? Maybe they're actually gonna just do the same thing next season and still have a whole bunch of picks and compete again. But I'm doing that duality of overrated and underrated.
Yeah, which now Jacked episode 1 from last week. Our first stab at this new structure. We obviously renamed our Panic or Chill to Panic and Chill in the middle.
Which
of the
it's fantastic.
episode.
The best decision of the entire podcast.
Absolutely. So. Episode 1. Oh wait, is it underrated or overrated? I saw the views last time. I think I saw it was at 26 views. I don't know what it is at now, but
it's at 27 views, which I think if you look at like
since.
whoever that viewer was, let us know. I think based off the feedback that we have from everybody, I'm gonna go with underrated. I think that I'm gonna go with underrated because I don't think anybody was expecting it. Like for like. Transparency. You approached me about doing this like literally like 4 days before it started. Yep. And so like in terms of like it going live on Saturday, it did not exist even in like
a week before
application, like even like 6 days beforehand.
Yep.
And so off of that alone, I'm going to go underrated because I think it does what I think Rigged was struggling with. And I think like we really didn't do a lot of Rigged and like with myself and Whitney and Squared. And part of it was because like it just was unsustainable to do it the way it was done in the past. Like Zarbi was able to dedicate so much time to be able to do it. And much with the way that the league used to be run in seasons, 2, 3, and 4, we have adapted as a league, both in league office and within the league itself, to make it more sustainable. I think that that's been a constant change that we have done to take something that we are all enjoying and ensuring that it's not dependent on one person or a group of people in order for it to continue. And I think that even goes down to like people like Elder, people like the minors leagues office that are going to be in charge of like uploading all the minors games. And so for all of this, I think like Jack kind of represents that idea of moving to a more sustainable, more enjoyable experience. It's no longer 3 hours of rambling and listen, it's fun rambling, but not a lot of league can tune in. Whereas now we have this consolidated 45-minute, hour-long podcast that is like everyone can see where we're going with it
Mhm.
and they can be able to tune in to specifically what they want to do. I think the next step is to go into Jacked and like set the timestamps for when each section starts. But I'm
Yeah.
gonna go underrated because I think we've had a really good reception from it. No one was expecting it. I think it's gonna be a more easily consumable way to find out what's happening in the SSBL.
Yeah, I agree. Which leads us to what's currently going on as this is uploaded on Saturday. Super Saturdays. Are they overrated, underrated? I'm going to go first here. I'm going to say they're underrated. Why? Because we're having an additional day of SSBL. Think about how many days during that off season, which was the longest off season I think we've had in our history. Think of how many days where it's like, dang, I wish an SSBL game was going on. I wish an SSBL game was going on. We're gonna go into week 2, week 3, and the Saturdays. All we have is Jacked, which is great. It's a great content filler. However, we do not have 8 games, which is something that everyone loves to watch SSBL. It's the best way to watch baseball. It is underrated. Super Saturdays.
Yeah, we will have 20 games through the first week because of Super Saturdays. I think that Super Saturdays are a way of, kind of acknowledging that we have, especially with the 16 game season, a little bit of a baseball problem, which is that there are so many games that you have to play in baseball, and deservedly, because baseball, I feel like, is one of the only sports where you need that many games to really determine who's the best. And it's even hard to determine that even with the sample size of like 162 games, and especially here in the SSBL, like 16 games. That is so hard to determine who is legitimately the best in a given season. And so I think especially like what you were saying in terms of like the time spans off, it was 2 months for most of the league's history, season to season. Yeah, I think this is by far the largest amount of offseason that we've ever had, without a doubt. And finally getting back into SSBL action, getting new people on the call as well, in terms of like not just the traditional callers, but getting new chances for others. It just makes it, I think it's going to make it so much nicer to be able to just have the games going on and help the league again have that sustainable model.
Yeah, absolutely. Which now brings us to our last segment like before we get into our week ahead. Panic and chill. We're going to start off with the topic of league office ran teams, which, if you're new to the SSBL or don't understand like how the league office portion or the league office ran teams works, that is anyone so league office is myself, Bisac, Whitney, Squared, and Zarby, and 4 of us manage teams as a full-time thing. Like that is our team. We're like sitting in as like a filler. But this season right now, which we did get an assistant for the night squad, which was really nice to see. But the Knights are ran by Whitney for this season, and the Walkers are ran by Zarby. So 6 teams are ran by league office people, and we went 1-5 this week. And that one win was the Walkers, which was the least
The
expected.
Walker Retrievers of all the games, Walkers over Retrievers. I am panicking for league office, and the reason why I say that is because I literally made a joke about like how, man, Whitney has won a Super Series. Josh has won a Super Series. Myself and Squared have not won Super Series, and so we need to win it to help League Office, continue its fruit. And I made the joke of, man, what if the next team to win the Super Series was the Walkers? Like, what if like we set up this Walkers team to tank this season, and because we kept Crew Heart, they actually ended up winning it
I'm
all.
telling you,
Like,
telling you, Brew Heart's
like
big.
I'm calling it right now. We are panicking if we are league office, and I'm also calling that if by the break, so if by 8 games in, the Walkers are legitimately in a place of like, not like 4-4. If they're like 6-2, or even potentially even like 5-3, I think we need to seriously debate about going in on actually trying to get them to win,
Right.
because that would be crazy. It's crazy, and I think we all had tough matchups this week. Bombers High Rollers obviously a tough matchup. Stingers Wildcats. I mean, clearly it was a tough matchup. You kind of dropped the ball with Skull Sparrows. I'm not gonna lie
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And then the Knights Gauchos tough matchup. Dragons Lumberjacks tough matchup. I think overall, like it, we could have even potentially seen us gone 0-6 if we're being honest
True.
about it.
Yep.
But I think for league office teams, we should be panicking right now
Nope.
because
I'm agreeing with
we
you on that
we
one.
run this league show. We should know how to run teams.
Uh, which, one of our games, one of the league office ran teams, their game was really plagued with injuries. Is their next topic here? Injuries, and it's not just the frequency. There were injuries. There were I think 4 or 5 total, but it's not the fact that there were 4 or 5 injuries. We have 3
Yeah.
weeks, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks. Majority of those injuries, outside of the one, I want to say a contusion by the pitcher. I can't remember which pitcher it was, but they are long-winded injuries. Those 3-4 week injuries, that's going to be tough for these squads to rebound. Are we panicking about which injuries are actually happening this season at SSBL? As in the past, we don't really get many of these like 3 to 4. It's we'll get the 2s or maybe put it on the bench kind of deal. But are we panicking here with these long-winded injuries?
Yeah, and technically it's 7 total injuries because also Do Some Ting had a body contusion as
Okay,
well, and that's not listed on
so
there,
we're
so I'll have
missing
to
a
add
couple.
that. But I mean, Graham Britton 3 weeks, Lucy Freishak 4 weeks,
Yep.
Amir Williams 2 weeks, Al Stevenson 4 weeks, Rice Hill 3 weeks. Like these are reduced. Like if we go back to what it was supposed to be, Freishak Stevenson would not be back for 6 weeks in the old model of the injury. So this is like with the reduced injury timeline as well. I definitely something to look out for as the season progresses, because I think if we're getting every single week, uh, I think a long-term injury is anything above 3 weeks. If we're getting 4 long-term injuries a week, we may need to reevaluate which injuries are which level,
Yep.
because that is a lot of injuries. Luckily, only one of them is a long-term injury to a pitcher, which I think is the main issue. Pitching has always been like a quick turnaround in this league in terms of you're doing well to you're doing poorly, and I think that's the main issue we need to worry about. But that's a lot of long-term injuries to have. I'm panicking right now.
No, absolutely. It's a panic to see that many injuries, but not just that many injuries at that high of a tier, to have people out for weeks upon weeks, which is not good for any squad. The next topic, this is one that you suggested, Game of the Nights. Go ahead and talk me through this one.
Yeah, so this is interesting because you're the one who usually prompts to me, but I get to prompt to you. I am the one who controls the cards now. So Game of the Nights, it just feels like they have been the longest games, and they're at the end of the night. And this is just something I wanted to like talk to you about in terms of the way that we structure on a day by day basis the games is. I personally try to structure them. The schedules are preset, and I go in and I try to make it so that the best game is at the end of the night. That way, it's sort of like a crescendo. We're leading in. We have the day games into the evening game into the night game, and that's the goal. But one, viewership tends to taper off as we get later on into the night, as well as if these games are going into extra innings, or even the Dragons Lumberjacks game, like that one went pretty long as well. So I'm gonna go panic or chill in terms of the idea of the game of the nights, and if there needs to be a restructuring of when they're put out.
Yeah, I'm panicking from a viewership perspective because I go back in. I go every morning. I go check the analytics, and it's got the timestamps, and it's typically, let me get my hand in here, a nice curve. And the curve, this part of the curve, which obviously we're looking at the camera, it should go that way. The back half of the stream is always tapering off, which I'm panicking because viewership does fall off for that game of the night. So is the game of the night, and I'll go ahead and throw in. We'll go back to overrated, underrated. I think it's a little bit overrated in terms of the time. Is it game 4? I don't think so. Maybe game 3 might be a good spot. I'm panicking. It's not
Hmm.
much of a. It's game of the night. It's long winded, especially. I mean, the other day, day 1 was a 3 hour stream. I mean, you're so basically waiting 2.5 hours for almost 2.5 hours for game 4 to even progress, which obviously we started at 5 p.m. Central. So it's a little different story there. But when the streams are starting at 7, that's potentially pushing it to 9:30, 10 o'clock for those Central people, and even later on the East Coast.
So should we then this week? Let's try this. Let's have the game of the night, and I'll even indicate it because we this has always sort of been like a casual thing, but we can like make it like a thing where in the schedule, like when it posts for the stream announcements, it'll say game of the nights. Let's make the game of the night the third game in the lineup, and then let's put like if viewership is already tapering off, like maybe we try and put what we think is like the biggest blowout, maybe in terms of like the last game of the night, especially because like even for game the evenings that start at like 6 p.m. Central. Like we're not getting done until 9 p.m., which a lot of people are, we've got some oldies and youngies here. So I'm going to tinker with the schedule. And then let's come back to this next week for Panic and Chill
Yeah.
for Game of the Nights and to see if people enjoy that schedule. And let us know in the comments and in Discord what you think about the idea of the Game of the Nights moving to third instead and making like the blowout game like a fourth game. Let us know in the comments of this video or in Discord.
Yeah, which leads us to the bringing back the Retrievers into the conversation. Your puppet, you're the Retrievers. You just lost to what might be like prior to the season deemed as one of the worst teams, especially worst teams in the Heroic Conference. Retrievers, is it time to panic after just this one game, even though it's a loss to the worst team in the Heroic, or are we chill? What's on your mind in terms of these Retrievers?
I'm panic, and I'm going panic because both of the icons leaders, the overdrafts and the retrievers, each had games against easy wins. The moonshots, I think, could be after a couple of weeks the worst team in the heroic, just with the way that they have structured their organization and how much talent they have in the minors. Um, don't get me wrong, the Knights and the Walkers are atrocious, but they also have some holdover veterans that are still in the lineups, as opposed to the Moonshots have put everything pretty much into the minors. And the Overdrafts came off with a 10-3 win. Retrievers had to have rallied if they wanted to have beaten the Walkers. So again, one game, but I'm starting to panic a little because you're supposed to be the Icon's favorite this season. And after all the offseason trades and after 1 week, I'm not convinced. We'll see if the overdrafts beat the Dragons, as well as it appears actually that the overdrafts face the Dragons, then they face the Walkers, and then they face the Liberty. So you're looking at the end of week 2, potentially at the end of week 2, the overdrafts being 4-0 and the Retrievers being 0-1. And that's a lot of games to make up. It's a 16 game season, but that is a big gap to start making up from.
Absolutely. I'm on the retriever side. I'm gonna say chill. Why retrievers don't play until week 3? I'm gonna remain chill because if you panic now, you're gonna be panicking for a little bit because you don't play until week 3 on the schedule here. So you're facing the Moonshots and you face the Express next. I'm gonna remain chill. It is obviously me and the Skulls coming off an upset loss as well to the Sparrows. It's just one game. It's also we now have 16 games. Is this something that we need to to panic on? No, I think it's one game. It's unfortunate. Luckily, it's out of division, like so they don't have to worry about playing them again and potentially losing to them again. So I'm going to stay chill if I'm the Retrievers. I think it's a little too early to panic. We'll talk after week 3 when they play the Moonshots and the Express that week. So which moves on to the week ahead. Day 1, to be honest, I wrote in the notes all games because I really think that this is a day for SSBL that there are so many key matchups. Obviously, we just swapped to the Unicorns at the Wildcats as the game of the night for game number 3. Walker's overdrafts Can the Walkers pull off another one against the Icons there? Or, and then we have the Dragons and Wrongfielders. A classic matchup, which this was, a semifinals matchup in season 1 before we had conferences. A really, historic matchup there in Dragons Wrongfielders. Can the Dragons bounce back? Can the Wrongfielders start off 2-0 in this season? And then we have the Skulls of Rock ball players. I think Skulls of Rock had the ball players numbers last season, but coming off that 2-0 loss, I don't know what we're going to expect from the Skulls of Rock, as they had to Emerald Diamond to face such a strong roster that is the ball players.
Yeah, without a doubt, all those games have huge ramifications for the rest of the season. The Dragons are lost there, and the Dragons facing a really tough overdraft squad, and you're facing your number 3 against the Wrongfielders number 2 in on week 2, day 1. So Dragons could very well be 0-3 after week 2, day 1 next week. And the Wrongfielders could be sitting at 2-0, which, if the Dragons are supposed to be competing with the Gauchos for the evolution, those are not games that you need to be dropping. Skulls, ball players, of course, as you mentioned, Unicorns, Wildcats, I think especially after the Wildcats showing against the Stingers, brings us to more of a consideration of, can the Wildcats seriously do something to the Unicorns here? And then, Walker's overdrafts. Walkers should be losing that one, but also thought that they were going to get walked over by the Retrievers. But to be fair, we'll see if the jinx is on for the Retrievers. And if they say something, if the overdraft say something about walking the Walkers, then, who knows? Maybe that's just the fate they need.
All right, which then leads to day 2, which there are obviously there's always going to be like a handful of games, but if we're going to highlight one in particular, it's going to be that Bombers ball players matchup. Bombers struggling with the injury bug and losing to the High Rollers in their first game of the season. This could possibly be a 2-0 ball players team coming into this matchup. Actually, no, 3-0, as ball players do play Saturday. So a 3-0 ball players team coming up against the Bombers, who this is their second game of the season. I think this is going to be a matchup that the Bombers have to win this one. I think if I'm Whitney, I'm panicking a little bit here against the ball player squad, like I said, who could come into this 3-0. That's terrifying. That's terrifying.
Now, the thing about that is that it's the Bombers versus the ball players number 4 as well. So that is going to be the Bombers number 2. So it's going to be Dixon versus Magic, which, can we just talk about the way that Maniac has structured his team, and that Magic is now his number 4? Like, that makes you know that he has revitalized his pitching, with Magic pitching in the 4th spot. So I think this is actually going to be my prediction game. So I'm going to predict that the Bombers are going to take this. I think that the Bombers are going to win it. Let's say they're going to win it 5-2 to the Bombers, and most of those runs are going to come in the middle of the game.
Okay, that's fair enough. Fair enough. Which I'm going to go ahead and use mine as the next game that we're going to talk about, day 3. Game of the night: Serpents versus Sparrows. Obviously, we're putting the Sparrows kind of on the spotlight for the first time after their upset of the Skulls, facing such a strong Serpents lineup. I think this one's going to be, to be honest, the Sparrows are very unpredictable since after that victory. They are at home again, so they are at Lafayette. So I don't know what to really expect from this squad. And honestly, I'm going to say Serpents. I hate to say that, but because I think the Sparrows could upset. It's a possibility. But I'm going to kind of go big here. In terms of big, I'm going to go say it's a 6-1 final score in favor of the Serpents. I just think
Big.
that, yeah, big. I'm going to say big in referring to, what it should be in terms of a big win in this. Obviously, day 1 set the scale of what big should be.
Yeah, I was about to say, because are we talking 19-4 big, or
but if you look at all the other scores for the days, 6-1 big score, 8-2, so on and so forth. So I'm going to say 6-1. The final score, Serpents take the Sparrows in that one. But again, I do think the Sparrows do have that chance of upsetting the Serpents, which will be the second win against that Epic Nova's division as well. Oh no, Serpents are no longer there. That's Epic. They're now Epic
Phenoms.
forget that, being on the no list for so long. But that's still two massive wins if Sparrows can pull that off.
Absolutely, and I think in terms of all the teams to look out for this season as the expansion, I think the Sparrows are the ones to, potentially could be the ones to sneak in there. They've got a tough division with the Phenoms, but when you look at overall in terms of the Epic, Mythic and Angels not going to be competing. The Epic Novas are going to be getting a lot of wins off of each other. And I think the same thing is for the Phenoms, where it creates a perfect storm for if the Sparrows can get the results that they need and leech off of their interdivision, they could vie for like that last seed in the Epic Conference. It's going to require, though, those other divisions to kind of feed off of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Which that's going to conclude it here for episode 2 of Jacked. Lots to talk about. We'll have an extra long episode next week as we'll talk about Super Saturday. So thanks for tuning in to this episode. My name is Jay Watt alongside Fight Sack. We'll see you guys next week for Jacked.
And thanks for the shirt.
Yeah,
We got it going.
Sector6pro.com.